Well, good morning, everyone. Uh, I really appreciate Judge Karen Miller, who has helped organize this class. Um, I, which is one of the first opportunities that we've had for the Jewish Study Center to share some of their knowledge with us. I have been really happy that we have a class that is dealing with modern humanism in Jewish thought, because I have been active in the branch of Judaism called Humanistic Judaism for over 20 years. And to have a speaker like Professor Yossi Turner to talk to us about the type of Jewish thought that is focused on humanism is quite an important thing for the community and for me especially. So just to introduce the course, when we think of the modern state, many of us have an image of a state that is secular. A secular state does not identify with a particular religion. Secularism is a concept that embodies a state, separation of religion and government, and citizens who enjoy their rights. In some secular states, governments may promote religious freedom. In other secular states, governments might be hostile to religion. The secular state developed over the last 300 years. Before then, most states endorsed specific religions or denominations, which they established as state religions. Such states either tolerated or repressed minority religions. In most of these states, the Jewish community exercised a certain degree of autonomy, often governed by their religious leaders. As courageous political philosophers and political leaders developed the underpinnings of the modern secular state, some Jews participated in these challenges to established religion. As Jews moved out of the jurisdiction of their religious leaders, they became citizens of secular states with the same rights as other citizens. They no longer needed to demonstrate traditional theological beliefs. They were no longer required to abide by Jewish law. Many Jews in the modern state no longer organize their life around belief in God, participation in Jewish ritual, or religious practice. Instead, they seek meaning through their relations with other human beings. They follow a humanistic approach to Jewish life. Since the 17th century, many Jewish philosophers and religious thinkers have adapted Jewish teachings to the humanism made possible by the modern secular state. Such efforts led to the creation of multiple denominations of Judaism, as well as secular and humanistic Jewish movements. This course explores the efforts of Jewish writers to embrace humanism in a modern Jewish context. Let me introduce our speaker, present for the whole course. Professor Yossi Turner is Professor Emeritus of Jewish Thought at the Schechter Institute of Jewish Studies in Jerusalem, and he's visiting professor at the Jewish Studies Center at the University of Florida this year. He's the author of Faith and Humanism, an inquiry in Franz Rosenzweig's religious philosophy, the relation to Zion and the diaspora in 20th century Jewish thought, a study in the philosophy of Jewish existence, and Quest for Life, a study of Aaron David Gordon's philosophy of man and nature. He's also involved in the development of an original philosophy of Jewish existence on the backdrop of contemporary realities. Professor Turner?
Thank you very much. let me just, do you mind if I sit while we're, it's always easier that way.
No.
You don't mind, okay, so this should work. Hopefully at the right level. By the way, Rick, so I very much enjoyed your introduction because it's almost, I guess, the complement of certain points that I'm going to make in my introduction. Just as anybody who deals with these areas of Judaism, human modernity, Jewish existence, and humanism, and things like that, can be aware of the different vantage points from which it can be discussed. And Rick, what I appreciated, and it really helps me out tremendously, is that the introduction you gave included kind of a view of a bit like this modernity, Western world, and humanism within it with a political focus, the same, right? And that's crucially important for a historical attempt to understand Judaism's relationship with modernity, or the ways in which Jewish thinkers worked out Judaism's relationship with modernity, because the challenges, as I'm going to mention in a moment, actually came from the social and political realities. The objective changes in the social and political realities, particularly in Central and then Western Europe, which were much, and most of the Jewish people, the time period that we're talking about, let's say the period that I'm focusing on for this lecture today, would be the 18th and 19th centuries. And at this time, about 90% of the Jews in the world lived in Europe, and the vast majority of them, although they lived in Eastern Europe, gradually during this time, there were many Jews moving to Western Europe, and the challenges, modern humanism, that become actual facts of life for both non-Jews and Jews who are joining Western society, goes on mostly in Central Europe, and that affects the entire Jewish world, East and West, let's say leaving out at this time many of the countries in the where Jewish communities in the Middle East, and so on and so forth. The other point, Rick, that you made that I think is very important. It's very important to notice that for the Western world and for Judaism, modernity begins at different times. Rick said correctly, it talked about the Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries in Europe, whereas the Jewish meeting with modernity and with modern humanism, after it's already taking hold in Western and Central Europe, really happens only toward the end of the 18th century, except for a few exceptions. And on course, a modern humanism is a modern phenomenon that affects virtually all Jews living in Europe. Again, at least those who aren't really under the iron grips of the Russian Empire, right? This all happens mostly in the middle of the 19th century, or gradually, ups and downs throughout the 19th century. So modernity and humanism, in that sense, for the rest of the West and for Judaism, begins in two different at two different times. With Judaism, it comes much later, and there already is a modern Western society and civilization that's come about both as a result of changing ideologies, philosophies, and even more so as a result of the Industrial Revolution and material and civilizational changes. So this is very, very broad background. And by the way, sure. And by the way, so I'm going to be using not most of the class today, but at least a significant part of it to give some of the historical background that we'll need for the later classes in general. You have before you for today two distinct texts, which are really aimed more at as examples of the confrontation, meeting the challenge, and absorbing, let's say, humanist principles and ideas in Jewish thinking. The two texts that you have before you, it's a little bit awkward in terms of time. I'm talking about in terms of the time in which the texts were produced, because the most important text, and that we'll definitely going to do today, is the text by from Moses Mendelssohn's book Jerusalem. And the text actually deals with Moses Mendelssohn in a way very often and not incorrectly considered the founder of the Jewish Enlightenment, let's say in the second half of the 18th century. And this text has to do with how he understands the biblical story of the divine revelation at Mount Sinai, right? The reason that Moses Mendelssohn brings this text in to this book is different than the reason that we're going to look at it, even though they're connected. What happened was that Moses Mendelssohn was a traditional Jew who grew up in a pre-modern Jewish community in a rural area and followed his teacher who became a rabbi in Berlin. At that time, Jews needed special passes to move from place to place or to be able to live in a certain area. There's a great story about Moses Mendelssohn that he actually, it's the benign anti-Semitism of the modern world. His teacher went before him and entered the gate of the city, the main city, because he had a pass by the government that allowed him to live in Berlin and become the rabbi of the Jewish community in Berlin. Moses Mendelssohn had no such pass, so he went there because he wanted to continue to learn from his teacher, and he actually entered the city. There was a special entrance for the Catholic to enter the city, and Jews who didn't have passes had to enter with them. There was odds kept on, they weren't allowed to stay, and so on and so forth. But the really interesting thing about Moses Mendelssohn is that after being in Berlin, this was the height of the European Enlightenment, which is one of the major beginnings of modern humanism. I won't be talking about the Renaissance here. Go back to the Renaissance to talk about modern humanism as well. But Moses Mendelssohn, was convinced by the logic of Enlightenment philosophy and started to formulate his ideas concerning a universal humanity, and wrote in German books on philosophy, on the afterlife, trying to suppose his books on aesthetics and so on and so forth. He wrote the book Jerusalem in the 1780s because he had a number of non-Jewish Enlightenment members who were, to make it an understatement, were intrigued by Moses Mendelssohn as this a Jewish Enlightenment. Most people didn't think that the Jews could be enlightened, right? And also we should know that the Enlightenment, by most of the Enlightenments themselves, was just considered another advance in Christianity. So how a Jew can join this Enlightenment perceived as a Christian cultural movement, that became difficult. In any event, what happened was that there were, as given two criticisms, attacks on Mendelssohn from different directions, both having the same source. One attack on Mendelssohn was Judaism is not a religion of reason. Judaism is a religion of dogma, and not only is it not a religion of reason, but it can be a religion of reason because it doesn't aim at universality, right? Christianity aims at universality. Judaism is the personal religion of Abraham's family that never sought to go beyond the nation. By the way, this touches on another point that we made, and I thought it would be important to add this also. When we're talking about Judaism and humanism, it's very important to remember it's not only about Jewish religion and its meeting with humanism, it's also about Jewish peoplehood and its meeting with religion. In the West, in the countries where even nation states either pretend or really are cosmopolitan societies, right? Part of the adoption to modern humanist ways and modern secular ways was by understanding Judaism as religion, right? Because that's where it stands on par with other groups that aren't the secular society, right? So now we have this situation where we have one side of people telling Mendelssohn that Judaism is not a religion of reason. It could never become, to have an equal status in society as non-Jewish or the Christian religion. And because Judaism was considered not a religion of reason, so there were those enlighteners who attacked Mendelssohn and said, Mendelssohn is really enlightened. He really is a person of reason. But he will only be able to show it in the near future when he converts to Christianity. It was still unheard of that a Jewish thinker can be, and again, this Mendelssohn, remember, not only was he a Jew, who apparently, I'm just assuming, spoke with an accent, a Jewish accent. I mean, still the first generation, that is any involvement with this at all. He was also, he had a hunchback. He became a tourist site. People came and used to stand in the windows, in Germany at the time, part of the movement, the Enlightenment movement, where the salons where people would meet and discuss art and philosophy, and Mendelssohn was part of it. People were just astounded that a Jew who looked like him can be a leading part of these discussions, or tourists who would come and stare through the window at that. So that was one criticism of Mendelssohn, that it's just unbelievable that a Jew can do this. And therefore, just wait and see. Mendelssohn's really honest. He's really one of us, and therefore he's going to convert. The other part of it was that Mendelssohn can't be a true enlightener because he's Jewish. And that's enough. And forget about him converting. He's not going to convert. He's just a fake. Mendelssohn wrote the book Jerusalem. He never wanted to make Judaism a part of the Enlightenment discussion. Because the Enlightenment and modern humanism, above everything else, places the concept of universal humanity. And while Mendelssohn really was exceedingly strict with the Jewish observance, and in the book itself, one of the things that we're going to see is why do Jews still need a commitment to the Torah, but in every one of the way, Jews are part of universal humanity and civil society, right? And that's coming along. He's just talking. He's a fake. You can't understand it. And Mendelssohn had to answer these questions. And the text that we're going to read in a moment is the text where he interprets the story of the revelation of Mount Sinai, which gives us more than clues. I think that he actually gives us keys as to how Mendelssohn answers the question of Judaism, is it a religion of reason or not, or discounting the reasons why others thought that it was not. And at the same time, you can see very clearly, as an interpretation of the biblical story of divine revelation, you can see very clearly what Mendelssohn has absorbed from modern humanism in his reading of the text, and how he integrates that in his, what you might call a broader layer of his traditional Jewish interpretation of this biblical text. So what I'd like to do now is just mention two things about the Enlightenment, and then later on about emancipation. Then we go to the text, to the Mendelssohn text. Everything that Rick said about modern humanism, its relationship to secularism and the state is absolutely true and necessary for the background of what we're going to read. The one other point, which coincides with an addition I made a little bit earlier on, is to remember that before the late 18th century, let's say the 1880s, 1890s, certainly, even 1890s, the Jewish community was not totally insular. There were business people and commerce and, traveling around the world. There were court Jews, who were part of the world outside of the Jewish community. But legally speaking, and by and large, the Jews had their own traditional autonomous Jewish community with self-rule, except with those areas that the general government said that the government decides, and not the community. And the Enlightenment came along. It's really the first time that there are a few earlier examples where you see Jews as Jews, like Moses Mendelssohn, a fellow by the name of Giesel, really interesting people who are part of this movement. It's here it's a philosophical movement of consciousness that embraces universal humanism. And what's even more important for our purposes is something that Mendelssohn knew was going to happen, but did not yet in his lifetime. That was that Western countries were going to become modern civil states and grant minorities, particularly Jews, because they were the major majority or minority around, equal citizenship. And that is the big difference. Mendelssohn's already dealing with challenges that are going to come up when there's emancipation of Jews, which once again means the establishment of the traditional autonomous Jewish community and making Jews equals in civil society. And with that, the only thing that we have to remember is that what this means is that it wasn't only an intellectual challenge. It's not, there's a tremendous amount of challenge in terms of ideas. For many reasons, the way that Jewish belief was understood earlier would not fit into this new world. I won't go into the reasons, but even more than that, the challenges are, if it's possible, and how can one remain a Jew? And how can Judaism continue in a setting that it never knew before, where Jews are integrated as individuals in the cosmopolitan-oriented civil society? So here, emancipation is like the challenges come up in the 18th century with Enlightenment, but they become very practical and challenges that exist within the Jews themselves with the advent of emancipation. And with that, I suggest that we go to the text. Okay? This is the Mendelssohn text. The other text I began to say is a Spinoza text. If we had Spinoza earlier on, 80 years before Mendelssohn, maybe more, interprets the same story of Revelation, and you get a different vantage point in a very early meeting between Judaism and Judaism. But whether we'll get to the Spinoza text or not today, it will depend on time. Let's go to the Mendelssohn text. You have it before you on page 68 at the bottom of the page. Okay. Is there anybody who wants any kind of clarification or question before we start? No. You don't have. So we have it for people who didn't bring a text.
You do that. Did you send it?
No, I mean, it sent it.
Yeah. If you didn't get it today, we'll just have to check our list and make sure you get it next time.
Okay. So at the bottom of the page, as I said, so this whole book, Mendelssohn has been building, you can call it a narrative, you can call it a philosophy to counter the attacks that I mentioned earlier. The first part is type philosophy of the state. What's with the education in the state, religion in the state, and we won't go into that. To take up the question, is Judaism yes or no a religion of reason, and therefore might be able to be granted equal status in the future civil society? Or is it not? That's what Mendelssohn is now going to deal with, and here's the text about in order to explain what Judaism is, he goes back to that story of the divine revelation in Mount Sinai. Let's begin to read. Would anybody, I have my, so I guess I should read the text. Okay, the last paragraph on page 68. To return now to my previous remarks, and here we're now going to have a sentence that caused, in my opinion, incredible amounts of Mendelssohn scholars to make a really, really embarrassing mistake. To return now to my previous remarks, Judaism does not claim to possess the exclusive revelation of eternal truths. And that's the question, how do you read that sentence? But that's a sentence, he starts out with that. Judaism does not have a claim to the exclusive revelation of truths, or religious truths, you might want to say, divine truths, that are indispensable to salvation. Judaism doesn't have that claim. It does not claim to be a revealed religion. Very strange to be writing a defense of Judaism and say, Judaism doesn't claim to be a revealed religion. Already, say here. Why? As this term is, at least not as this term is commonly understood. Revealed religion is one thing, revealed legislation another. That's another distinction we're going to have to uncover. And I'll be very happy if afterwards I'll be quiet and you'll explain the text to me, right? So what is this distinction between revealed religion? It's one thing, revealed legislation another. He goes on, right? How do we know if that's revealed in legislation or revealed religion? He says it's not revealed religion. He continues, the voice that was heard at Sinai at that great day did not proclaim, it's getting stranger and stranger again. The voice that was heard that great day at Mount Sinai did not proclaim, I am the eternal your God, the necessary autonomous being, omnipotent and omniscient, who rewards men in future life according to their deeds. What a long sentence to say what God did not say at Mount Sinai. So it goes on, it says, this is the universal religion of mankind, not Judaism. And this kind of universal religion, which is not Judaism, he's saying, without which man can become neither virtuous nor happy, was not, and in fact, could not have been revealed at Sinai. These eternal truths necessary for salvation, happiness, and what else does he say? Whatever, what's essential to universal religion could not have been presented at Sinai. For who could have needed the sound of the thunder? It's getting more into the story now. Who would have needed the sound of the thunder and the blast of the trumpets, right? That's it, it's clouds, it's thunder, it's lightning around the mountain before God speaks. So who needs that stuff? To become convinced of the validity of these eternal verities. Surely not the unthinking animal-like man, whom his own reflections have not yet taught to acknowledge the existence of an invisible being that governs the visible world. So what we read until this point, we see that Mendelssohn reading the story of the revelation of God to the Israelites at Mount Sinai in the book of Exodus. He has the picture, the concrete picture in his mind. And the point is, what is not Judaism? The things he's saying here is it couldn't have been there. Can anybody explain to me what you think Mendelssohn might be doing here? Why is it so important? Why are these expressions of universal humanism, but not possibly the Judaism that was revealed at Sinai? And if that is his point, doesn't it seem to be making his defense of Judaism harder and not, it doesn't sound like a defense of Judaism. It almost sounds like, oh yeah, they say that Judaism isn't a religion of reason. They must be right. You can't find any of that in the Sinai. Let's go back to the first question. Let's think for a moment. Why does he think the thunder and lightning in Sinai and everything that's happening in the story of the Revelation at Mount Sinai is irrelevant when we're talking about a universal religion of reason? Can anybody answer that for me? Why would that be irrelevant? He said it in one sentence, described in one sense the person who already has enlightenment, the person who already has knowledge of God. So for anybody else, this would make no sense. It wouldn't help bring them to the Torah or make a commitment or anything else. Right? Anybody want to? Go ahead, Rick.
In general, I think that he's trying to show that Judaism is one of many religions, and that Judaism should be viewed just as part of the world of religions.
Okay, so I actually think that you're right, but it would be very, very difficult in the paragraph that we just read.
Can you repeat a little bit for the people on Zoom?
Yeah. The question.
Yeah.
Okay. What Rick said was he believed that it sounds like Moses Mendelssohn is trying to show that Judaism is not a particular religion that stands out as different than all the others. I'm interpreting you, of course, but rather it's just one of the religions, right? And in order for what Rick is to say, what Rick is saying to make sense, the emphasis would have to be, as it seems actually to be, what did and what did not exist. The story as a revelation of Sinai itself. Meaning that, yeah, there's nothing universal here, there's nothing reasonable here. That's the point. That's the why he's saying God did not start off the Ten Commandments by saying, I am the Lord, the eternal, creator of the universe, who is perfectly just and omniscient, all-knowing and all-powerful, right? How does it start? So that I am the Lord of your God, who known to your forefathers and who brought you out of Egypt. Nothing whatsoever, right? So it's obvious that Rick is correct, but there's still something that we haven't been told here. And that is, okay, so we can see, if we stop here, like Rick is saying, then you can see that Mendelssohn, without meaning to, justifies all of the critics who said that Judaism is not a religion of reason. And now Mendelssohn himself said, at Mount Sinai, there are no universal, reasonable principles of divinity that everybody would have to accept because of reason. It's only God appearing to this particular people. Mendelssohn's point, this is a thing that you have to take notice. Mendelssohn's point is actually in what he hasn't said yet, and he will say in the next paragraph. Yeah, if you want to understand Judaism as Judaism, even if you want to see Judaism as he does, as a religion of reason, you need to understand what was in Judaism before that day of revelation at Sinai, and what, in distinction to what may have been known beforehand, in distinction with that, what on the day of the revelation at Mount Sinai was said, why it was said, particularly to Jews, involving the ethnic, family, national heritage, right? Part of your forefathers, I took you out of Egypt. And the bottom line here says yes. And here's where many Mendelssohn scholars just go totally wrong. Mendelssohn is basically saying, if you take a look only at the revelation of Mount Sinai, you will understand why Judaism is still obligatory to Jews. Or if we look only at the revelation of Mount Sinai, we will find that at that day at Mount Sinai, God made a covenant with the Israelites that established God's Torah as the law. No philosophical principles, no understanding of God here. It's a covenant between God and the Jewish people. And this is why people make the mistake of thinking that Judaism is only a particularistic religion that's not a religion of reason. But that's because they're only looking at what happened on the day of the revelation itself. And so, yes, Mendelssohn's saying, writing it to the rest of the world, yes, I'm a true enlightener. I believe in universal religion, but I also have my own particular Jewish commitments that come from that continent. It hasn't answered the question yet. So how do we know? How can we recognize Judaism as a religion of reason to get past this criticism? This now comes up in the next paragraph, and here we're going to see something else that just wasn't mentioned in the previous one. What does he say now? We'll continue. The miraculous voice. Here he's talking about miraculous. Mendelssohn is an enlightenment who still believes in the traditional religious beliefs of miracle, prophecy, and revelation, but that even those fall under the category of reason. They wouldn't have make any sense, wouldn't be obligatory if they weren't controlled by reason. Nonetheless, God spoke at Sinai for Mendelssohn. He's a fundamentalist in that way. God actually spoke at Sinai in a miraculous way. But the miraculous voice could not have instilled any such concept of this kind in this kind of person, and consequently could not have convinced him. Remember what he said in the previous paragraph? None of this lightning, the thunder, would have helped, would have made people more committed to God's law, right? Had they not been educated beforehand, if they were ignoramuses. That's what he said in the previous paragraph. So what does he conclude now? So he says, right. It means that on the day of the revelation, they were already enlightened. It says, nor could it have affected the sophists whose ears are buzzing with so many doubts and broody questions that can be no longer hear the voice of common sense. So if you came to the revelation of Mount Sinai, hear God's miraculous voice speaking, hear the thunder, see the lightning, and everything that's going on. If you haven't been enlightened before, if you don't have common sense, then one of two things is going to happen. You're going to be totally enraptured in what you might call mythical religion because you believe that there's a miraculous force up there, or you'll wind up being a sophist, totally confused. What's the truth behind this? There are 100 different truths. Who knows what they are? He continues. But the person who has common sense and who is already enlightened, so about the enlightenment, he demands rational goods proofs, not miracles. But on the day of the revelation itself at Sinai, now we're going to see this just one form of revelation. The revelation, the particular revelation to the Jewish people. On that day, there were no proofs and no rational arguments. Why? He demands rational proofs, not miracles. And even if the great master or teacher of religion were to awaken all the dead from the dust on which they once stood, in order to confirm thereby an eternal truth, right? The skeptic would still say the teacher has revived many dead. Yet I still know more about the truth than they did. Meaning that what Mendelssohn is trying to show is that, once again, in all these different ways, don't expect a universal revelation of reason at Mount Sinai. All I know now is that someone can do and make us hear extraordinary things. If you're looking for rational truth, a rational explanation, that's the furthest you're going to get. Somebody's manipulating our senses. But can there not possibly be several such beings that simply do not consider it advisable to reveal themselves at this moment? How far all this is still removed by what's going on the day of Sinai? How far is this removed from the infinitely exalted idea of a unique, eternal deity that rules the entire universe according to its unlimited will and is able to discern men's innermost thoughts in order to reward them according to their merit? if not here, then in the afterworld. We can understand Nicholson's belief in a lot of ways. He may just be following Maimonides, but this is an example of a rational belief in God, an infinite mind who knows and controls and therefore creates, right? And when we get in the end, how far all this is still removed that we read from the infinitely exalted, I give you that. Who did not know this? Anybody who did not know that God is a supreme idea, pure wisdom, and so on and so forth. Anybody who did not have this enlightened understanding of God beforehand, who is not imbued with these truths which are indispensable to man's happiness, and therefore approach the holy mountain unprepared, perhaps stunned and overwhelmed by the great and miraculous events that took place there, yet he still would not have caught the truth. Now, we'll just to finish what he's saying here, we'll run right through the next paragraph, and this is the point. No, all this was supposed to be already known. This is, I guess, in Hebrew and in traditional Jewish learning is called a chiddush. Right? Here's the point that Mendelssohn makes that I wonder if it was ever made. There's something to hang his hat on. He says, no, you don't get it right. The Jewish understanding of God and the world as a religion of reason was not given at Mount Sinai. It was a part of Judaism even on the days before Mount Sinai. And he says, no, all this was supposed to be known already. It had probably been taught. The Bible talks about 3 days of preparation before God comes down at Mount Sinai, without explaining what they're supposed to be doing those 3 days. So Mendelssohn jumps in and says, proved by human reason, it had probably been taught and explained to the people during the days of preparation. So 3 days before the revelation itself. He needed something to fill in. It's perfectly. And then his whole story is great. But human reason was certain beyond all this knowledge, this understanding of God. And now the divine voice proclaimed after the reasonable understanding of God was already derived in the days of preparation. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. The house bondage, right? So that only then does he go to the personal relationship, the experiential relationship between God and the people, assuming that what God is, the people knew already before the revelation. A historical fact on which the people's legislation can be founded, as well as the laws that were to be revealed here, commandments and ordinances. Universal trends. And here I come back and talk about all the scholars who write again and again. Mendelssohn did not believe that Judaism has a religious philosophy. It's only a matter of laws and ordinances. That's not what Mendelssohn is saying. Many scholars didn't say that. But what Mendelssohn is saying is that the founding event of Judaism as a particularistic religion talks only of laws and ordinances because it's a private or particular covenant. The universal Judaism, again, was there beforehand. So then I continue, and that's I started, and that's why Bible says, "I am the Lord your God who made a covenant with your fathers, Abraham, and Jacob." Right, and so we can stop here, right? But what we have then is a situation in which he says there's a universal religion, or a religious belief, we can call it, that was made known to the Jews before Mount Sinai. And then Judaism became the particular religion of the Jewish people and a private kind of covenant at Mount Sinai. And I'm going to stop here and ask you, how does this help Mendelssohn answer the challenge for which he wrote the book? How does this help Mendelssohn answer the presupposition that says Judaism is only a particularistic family religion and has nothing to do with the universal religion of reason, and therefore can never be recognized by the Enlightenment or the civil society based on universal Enlightenment principles. How does this help us? I know Mendelssohn is writing at a time that he didn't want to appear as an arrogant Jew. And so a lot of this is connecting up the points that he made. He knew that if he stated everything explicitly, it could very often be taken as a Jewish attack on Christianity, which he didn't want to happen. But the work here is to be done. So how does this answer the question? Okay. What kind of Judaism will we have if, according to Mendelssohn's depiction, let's assume there was no revelation announced, and all there was reasonable understanding of God beforehand? If that was Judaism, what kind of Judaism would it? Right? It would obviously be a Judaism which has actually no particularistic character. It wouldn't be a Judaism that you could say at the time of emancipation, where Jews are becoming citizens, but remember, you're still obligated to follow the covenant with Sinai. In every other way, you can be totally human. Now we ask the same question. What kind of religion would Judaism be if it only had the revelation at Sinai and didn't have a reasonable understanding of God or based on universal principles previously, right? Then it would prove his attacker's right. Judaism is only a family, particularistic religion that's built on inner tradition and the memories of having experienced this miracle, right? Nothing to do with reason, universal reason, nothing to do with universal humanity. So what comes out of this discussion in Mendelssohn are two things. Number one, that he sees Judaism as a double-tiered phenomenon. The most obvious and known tier to everybody comes from the revelation outside. From that day on, there's a personal and concrete covenant between God and the people of Israel, and it's always obligated. That existed in biblical times, in Talmudic times, it existed in pre-modern times, and has nothing particular to do with modernity. It has to do with the Bible that fits us, this personal relationship between God and the people of Israel. But that's just the first tier. He maintains even more than that despite the fact that Judaism is indeed a particularistic religion that has ordinances and law, and not yet necessarily universal ideas concerning belief, right? That's only one part of it. The other part of it is that all true religion, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, all true religion for Mendelssohn is based upon universal principles. And here, right, on what happened the day before Sinai or the 3 days before Sinai, what Mendelssohn is doing, he's portraying the deist conception of religion that most of the enlightened people were beholden to. Revelation for most of the enlightened, the deist concept of revelation is nothing other than Judaism. The idea that stands behind it is that God either created the world and created nature, or that God, the world, and nature are all the same. In any event, coming from Spinoza, in any event, the laws of nature and the human ability to understand those laws and the human ability to draw conclusions from the facts that are learned through these laws. For the deists, that is divine revelation. When you're thinking logically and when you're thinking with reason, your mind is just participating in divine universality of divine reason. Nothing more than nothing less. So now what Mendelssohn actually has come along saying is there actually is a common religion to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Of course, it's Judaism and Christianity here That's interesting, because all three hold to this philosophical or reasonable understanding of God. And here he insinuates, of course he won't say it concretely, that there is something, a slight advantage in Judaism over the other two. It's not said explicitly, but it can't be ignored. What's the difference? When he says on the day of the revelation at Sinai that no eternal truths were revealed, what he's really saying is that opposed to Christianity and Islam, Judaism never confused the particular forms of its own historical religiosity and the universal idea of religion that it shares with other religions. The universal idea of religion is the foundation, but then the Torah that God gave to the Jewish people at Sinai brought those universal principles into the concrete presence of God in Jewish tradition. I won't go into it, but this is talking about the laws of the prophets, the laws of the sabbatical and the Jubilee, which all have to do with divine justice and things like that. So he's saying in a sense that Christianity, Islam, dogma, this is that's explicitly someplace else in the book. They have beliefs that if you don't believe these beliefs, right, then you're not holding to the religion. It says Judaism doesn't have that because the beliefs are part of the universal religion that all people of reason have revealed to them through divine and their own reason. Whereas Judaism, Jews know, is an addendum to that religion of reason, where in order to keep the religion of reason, we're given our own covenants that we have to make. So he takes in the universal. He's a humanist in that he allows principles of universal reason to guide his reading of the Bible, which was very rare in the modern world. I mean, it's there, but not in such a way that if it's with the principles of reason that it's legitimate, and if not, then it's rejected. He's a humanist in that he's unwilling to view Judaism as something that is not a part of the universal religion of reason that the enlighteners of his time believed in. And he's the humanist because he understands even his own particularist Judaism to be nothing but an extension or an added on level to the universal revelation of reason that's existed in the past. So I'll stop here with Mendelssohn and open up with any questions, comments, and we'll go to the Spinoza text if anybody wants to hear what Spinoza does. It's kind of a challenge. I'll mention that afterwards. Any questions, comments?
Normally take the mic around.
Please do. I'm always up for a good challenge.
Right, so online or here, the Acorn Room, anybody has any comments or questions? I would have a question, and that is whether this is an apologetic for Judaism, basically saying we may appear different, but we're like you.
It's an apologetic for Judaism, definitely, but I don't know if it's if the central point of the apologetic is that we may appear different, but we're just like you. That's one part of it. It's an apologetic for Judaism, first of all, technically, because it's configured in order to answer attacks. And that's just what an apologetic does. It's giving a defense of Judaism, right? But the attacks or the challenges can be a high-level principle thing. It's not just a matter of what we would say today. I mean, you can see that he has actually no problem with being different. On the matter of covenant, commitment of Jews to Judaism in the present, Jews have to be different in this case. But they have to be accepted by the state on the equal status with Christianity.
Other comments or questions, please raise your hand or raise your hand online. Okay, so thank you.
So maybe I should just add, you wanna,
No, I want to hear about it. You said you want.
okay, I'll say something that, I'll say a word about the company. That's, here's the fascinating thing. The reason that, I didn't think that we could have text, but the reason I brought Spinoza is because if we're talking about 80 to 100 years before Mendelssohn wrote Jerusalem, we can see that Spinoza already, and I probably in Spinoza's interpretation of the biblical story and the revelation of Mount Sinai probably inspired Mendelssohn. There are a lot of things. I mean, Spinoza's book was called, what I'm referring to, is it's called the Tractatus, the political theological tractate. It's trying to work already out at the end of the Renaissance, the relationship between the state and religion, following the terrible things that happened because of the not working out of the relationship, of not having a separation or a clear hierarchy between state and religion. So he's recalling the wars of religion between Protestants and Catholics, the Spanish Inquisition, in which his own family, the Jewish family, had a very hard time eventually that way to Holland. He's even recalling his own experience as a Jew being excommunicated from the Spanish Portuguese synagogue in Holland, and so he realizes all in the middle of the 17th century, the times are changing. It's not, but all he can do now is not expecting a civil state. Is see what can we do with religion in order to make the state more humane. That's really what he's doing there. What he does, and this is the incredible thing, is that he interprets the story of the revelation of Mount Sinai in such a way that shows that at the time of Mount Sinai, very different than Mendelssohn, at the time of Mount Sinai, the Jews were put in a position that they had to choose a government from within a state of chaos. They were just released from slavery. They did not yet have a new society, didn't have any kind of government, and no norms other than those that the slave had. What he's really doing here is, that's Spinoza. He interprets, I would put it like this: if Mendelssohn, in a certain sense, interprets the biblical story of revelation at Mount Sinai in accordance with the political theory of John Locke, right? I mean, what's the big thing with Mendelssohn? At the day of the revelation at Mount Sinai, we already had a universal ideal of reason to guide the implementation of the covenant, right? That's an idea of John Locke, that society inherently contains an ideal of reason, as opposed to Thomas Hobbes. Spinoza follows Hobbes. Mendelssohn follows Locke. What is Spinoza doing in the story of Sinai that follows Hobbes? Well, Hobbes maintained that the beginnings of all society has to do with the violence and fear and insecurity of human beings in the state of nature, and that people don't enter society because they already have an ideal of reason that drives them, but people create society in order to avoid the worst evil. They're willing to suffer even the pressure and maybe even, evils of government, the power of government, in order to be protected by government from the dangers of the state of nature. But what happens according to Hobbes in a society? You're always in a state of nature, that there is no law, there is no society, and then people together, out of each of their own peers, bound together and choose a sovereign who's now going to protect them. And that's basically John. So how does Spinoza interpret the revelation of Mount Sinai? This one, he says, so the Jews came out of Egypt, they had no society, and they had no law, and they had no norms, but they had to choose one. So what did they do? They, under Moses' advice, because they only met Moses, right? God started talking at Mount Sinai, they all passed out, right? They only actually had a relationship. Moses suggested making God. Now that's already a very humanist interpretation, right? Moses suggests that God, that you can see in the Bible, Hobbes' theory working out. The Jews needed a sovereign. God created the law. Then it didn't work out. Why not? Because the people already always got confused between God and Moses. I'm making a light of it. It's more serious than that. But immediately after Moses died, his function as the intermediary between the divine sovereign and the people was divided up between prophets, princes, the heads of each tribe, and Levites. And at a different time, I mentioned the prophets, right? So now what's happening is instead of there being one sovereign with a law that all accept, there are different parts of society that are arguing about, or actually fighting each other as to who actually holds the divine authority. They'll say the Levites and the priests have their say, and the princes, they say they are the direct descendants of Moses, and so on and so on. What's Spinoza's point? First of all, to show that the Bible takes into account Hobbes' theory, but even more so, because he also couldn't talk or say anything that would sound like saying something bad about Christianity or the state or the church. In his time, he's trying to show how the eventual destruction of the Israelite state in the Bible was a direct result of processes that started with making God the sovereign and then allowing that sovereignty to be expressed through a theocracy. He's trying, because his point in the present was, let the church have its say, but keep it far away from government power. If you want to know why there are so many atrocities, Spinoza's point, he can't say it explicitly, in the Spanish Inquisition, in the wars of religion, and he was bringing the Calvinists and he was in the church, right there. Go back and see what happened to the Israelite nation after they formed their society in terms of the theocracy. Had Moses or the people been the sovereign, they couldn't have worked it out. But since each one claimed the divine authority, it eventually exploded the society and caused destruction and exile. And that was the point he wanted to have learned in Europe at this time. So that's a very different, but nonetheless, you might say modern human reading of the same biblical text for contemporary purposes.
Great. Thank you so much for the extra discussion on Spinoza, which some people say is that Judaism was one thing before Spinoza and something totally after Spinoza.
You mentioned what we'll be doing in the next sessions, so maybe this is a good time. So just very generally, you can see that what we talked about today was a particular form of the meeting between Judaism and modern humanism in the 18th century, but whose repercussions actually are looking forward already to the emancipation of the 19th century. I don't claim that I'm going to remember each one of the classes at the moment, but in the future class, I think next week, we're going to be talking about the concept of history in Rabbi Nachman Krochma, because one of the results of the meeting between Judaism and humanism in the modern period is adopting a historical approach to ancient texts, rather than only the authoritative traditional one. How does a big Torah scholar like Rabbi Nachman Krochma make the traditional interpretation and critical historical scholarship jive? Fascinating concept. That'll be one class. Another class will be on the teachings by a fellow named Rabbi Chaim Hirschson, who was also another Talmudic scholar who was very much influenced by the American judicial system, American constitutionalism, and he has like an 8-volume book of responsa. Actually, was a Zionist, having to do with creating a secular Jewish democratic state based on Jewish law. So, and then we see how much he's he thought it could work because of American constitutionalism. So that's another meeting between tradition and humanism. And again, not all of them. The last two sessions are going to be on the meaning, on the humanistic meaning of the Sabbath. It's socialist, in Jewish socialist and social Zionist texts. So that's, I haven't mentioned all of them, but that's it. Oh.
And if you provide us the text the week before, we'll be
That's
sure to
exactly what we're gonna
get it to everyone.
do. Okay.
Right, so before we close, I know the audio was not so good for those online, and it will definitely be better in the Oak Room when we go there next week. In addition, that should encourage the few of you who are left online to come to the Oak Room and join us. But let's thank Professor Turner. Really impassioned and wise presentation.
Everybody have a good day, and I'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Got it.